Well, now there's something called uCampaign, which claims credit for a lot of what happened. For example, the victory by Ted Cruz in the Iowa caucuses in 2016, and a few other things that we wanted to talk about. So let's bring in Thomas Peters. Thomas is the CEO of something called uCampaign. You can find it at ucampaign.com. He is tweeting at uCampaign update, and that's you as in the letter U. Thomas Peters, thanks for joining us. Thanks for being here.
Pleasure to be with you, Tim.
So you started off as, you were doing the American Papist blog, which goes back about 12 years. Was that your first foray into using the web for this kind of communication?
It was. I was a blogger back when it was cool, and then I had to move on.
So you had the Cheetos and the RC Cola and all that kind of stuff, right?
It was my first introduction in online digital organizing.
Okay. What is different from, with online as opposed to, say, traditional grassroots campaigning?
I think the big paradigm shift that we're seeing nowadays is just how much data is changing the digital landscape. It's interesting you talk about the history of these presidential campaigns and how their use of technology has changed every 4 years. And that process is only accelerating. So when I founded the company in 2014, we focused a lot on building smartphone apps because everyone's on their smartphone all the time, and that process hasn't really changed. And now in 2018, we're getting into texting in a big way because that's kind of the last safe place to contact people. So that's a lot of what I've seen change over the last 12 years now.
You talk about the Ted Cruz campaign. I will tell you that I've having signed up to receive a lot of the messages as a reporter, was in Iowa and was also in New Hampshire, and was getting a lot from both Ted Cruz and Senator Bernie Sanders. They seemed to be much more aggressive in direct-to-phone texting, and they were using a lot of event apps that you could use to sign up to be in attendance at something. So who was, aside from what we know that you did with Ted Cruz, but which campaigns were really on the top of things in 2016?
I'd say the top three were Cruz, Bernie, and Trump. And it's no surprise that, two of those three were, the top two of a very crowded primary field. And I think Bernie would have given Trump a real run for his money because of his digital prowess if he had had a chance to face him in the general election. All three of these campaigns invested heavily in digital. I think it's no surprise that Trump won, and he was the first presidential candidate to invest almost half of his money in digital as opposed to TV and field.
Now, let's separate the digital investment from Twitter, which we all know President Trump does an awful lot of that. And I think in some ways he's unique, that it's very difficult to replicate that kind of success because he straddles the Hollywood as well as the political world. But I wonder, what investment in digital did he make that you thought was key?
Well, I think he was really smart to have us build his official smartphone app. Obviously, I'm biased about that. But what we tend to focus on isn't so much the social networks like the big ones like Facebook and Twitter. We focus on people's personal social networks. Basically, the people you have in your phone address book. These are the people, friends, family, coworkers that you actually talk to and care about outside of when you're online. And one of the things that we invented for Trump was the ability to match people's phone address books to the voter file. So when it came time for the election, we got people to reach out to that personal network with personalized, data-informed, basically calls to action, calls to go vote. And we had an extraordinary amount of success with that.
Now, obviously, again, we are talking with Thomas Peters, founder, CEO of uCampaign. You work with Republicans, right? Mostly, that's pretty much your bag.
It's a very polarized tech landscape right now, and it's actually gotten even more polarized than when I started. You now have companies that are really having to line up on one side or the other because if they work on both sides, the other half of their clients will drop them. So yes, we're a center-right tech company, and we're there trying to provide the best tools to Republicans and center-right causes, just like the Democrats are with their people. Wow,
that's interesting. It's not like a lawyer, then. You can't defend one group and then defend another group that's very different. You basically are going to be working. It's like Lanny Davis is working for Michael Cohen now. You can't do that if you're doing what you do.
It used to be more the way you described, and I think that's overall a sad trend, an unfortunate one, but it's pretty unmistakable right now. Mark Zuckerberg wasn't hauled before Congress to explain why he helped Obama win in 2012, but he had to show up in 2016. So in that polarized environment that we're in right now, it's actually helped our bottom line a lot because Republicans still need really good digital tools.
What kinds of information do you collect that's of most value to political campaigns?
A couple things. First, our apps are built with this concept called gamification. So we basically make volunteering like a game. So people earn points and badges and social capital for doing mundane actions like door knocking and phone canvassing and donating. And so we make it fun. But what that allows us to do is to create these very accurate models and histories of what kind of actions people are doing. And then through that, we can tell a campaign, well, this person is really excited about door knocking. That's the kind of action you should ask this person to do. Or this other person has successfully recruited a lot of their friends. This is the person you should have, throw a pizza party to get a lot of people in this neighborhood together. And so those are the kind of nuggets of gold that you can pick out when you're tracking and analyzing everything in one system.
Do you find it's more effective with a younger demographic than with an older demographic or not?
We try to be agnostic because, ultimately everyone can vote. So we try not to make our technology so youth-focused that old people can't access it. But we also try to make sure that we're operating in the right medium so that we can access younger people, which is why texting is such a huge deal for us. Only 48% of households have landlines still. And younger people, even folks under 40, prefer to be texted than called. And so that's why we developed a tool called Rumble Up, which allows us basically to text any person in the United States with a political message.
Yeah, I mean, I talk about people under 30 for the most part. I talk to them that don't even watch TV anymore. You know what I'm saying? I mean, when you talk about whether television advertising is effective or not, that certain demographics are not even watching TV, pretty much. Whereas I wonder how many people over the age of, say, 45 are not just comfortable with, but maybe adept at using the kind of apps that you would be putting out there for people to put on their smartphones, for example.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right about that. A friend of mine says it really well. If you're a political campaign, your competition isn't the Democrat or the Republican. Your competition is Netflix. There's so much entertainment. People are so distracted and busy that you have to be communicating with them in ways that break through the noise. And that's why we found such incredible success through text messaging, is it breaks through the noise. People still read their text messages. It's back, kind of the way email was when it was you got mail back in like the 90s. And so for the Supreme Court nomination, we're using texting actually to get people's attention long enough to ask them to call their senator. And that's had a lot more success than the traditional landline methods already.
Is this something that is more effective basically as a way of bringing people together based on their social ease? Or I guess I'm trying to think of a way to put it, but it sounds less issues-oriented than it does social dynamic-oriented, if I'm making myself clear on that.
You are. So our apps create safe spaces for people to share things that they're very passionate about that the big social media channels don't allow as much anymore. A perfect example is an app we built for the National Rifle Association. We've managed that app with them for a few years, and that is a place where people who feel very strongly in favor of the Second Amendment can go and talk about that issue in a way that the average gun owner isn't going to go onto Facebook and expect to have a fruitful debate with people, because as soon as you bring that topic up, people start choosing sides, they start fighting, it gets negative. Nobody wants to do that anymore. But if they know that there's a place where they can meet other like-minded people, that's still attractive, and that's what we create for people who are on the right of a lot of these issues.
So on candidates, we understand one thing. What about, for example, we got a Supreme Court nomination coming up? How would it be a factor in, say, trying to move senators one way or the other?
Oh, it's huge for us. So, for instance, during the Gorsuch nominations, just with the National Rifle Association app alone, we could send all their supporters a push notification saying, contact your senator. And all they had to do was tap that, and it would start calling their senator along with a script where they would call and say, here's why I want you to support Trump's nominee. And they would get points for doing so. And the NRA got a list of all the people who did it. So it was like gangbusters. And now we're extending that to where these organizations can text people that they think are likely to support Trump's nominee and get them activated without them even having to download an app. So that's where things are heading. It's going to be a very different landscape, even than when Gorsuch was nominated for us in terms of the services we can offer our clients.
We will watch it closely. Thomas Peters, thanks for spending some time with us today on POTUS.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thomas Peters, founder, CEO of uCampaign. That is a little u, lowercase u, and campaign. And you can see what they're doing on the website at ucampaign.com. And their new age political campaigning, gamifying. That's a new word I hadn't heard before. Anyway, the Twitter handle is at uCampaign, again with the letter uCampaign update.